All right, here we go. You ready to throw out some inspiration?
Inspiration. I mean, it's our first time to do 2 a week in like a month. I am jacked. I'm ready. December 14th, the year 2023. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 735.
735. Yeah, if you're struggling today, get your ass out the door. Let's go do it.
Seriously.
Let's do it.
Speaking of struggling, what did Santa bring you this year?
What's Santa? What?
Yeah, what's it? If you got one big ticket item for Santa to bring you, what would it be?
I think peace of mind. I don't know.
Ooh, that's such a Miss America answer.
I think the
World
American
peace.
people.
I would have them bring me world peace.
Because people in
Pretty good. That's a pretty good one. My God, peace of mind. Always with the good one-liners. Always good.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think what have I been? Not much, man. I'm good.
I mean, frankly, the question is, have you been good enough this year to get anything?
That's a great question too. That's fair.
Yeah.
I think I haven't. The intentions are in the right spot.
You get an E for effort.
Yeah. Why not?
All right.
I mean, it's a struggle, man.
Listen, you don't have to ask me. I get in a fight every year with everyone in my family right about now.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man.
What do you want for Christmas? Nothing.
Nothing.
I got everything I could possibly need. And if I want to, I'll buy it. And if I don't want to buy it, then I won't.
Yeah. I mean, the
So don't
pressure of the
take
commercialism is tough.
It
man.
is.
It's
Don't
like
me stress out about trying to come up with something that I might kind of want just so you can give it to me.
I know.
I don't want to do it. I don't want. All I need for the holidays and really any Christmas is get together with family, relax, enjoy some time away from work, unplug, and just think about what you have, all the things you have to be thankful and grateful for.
Yeah.
Not to stress about what to get somebody, your Uncle Jim who you haven't seen for 2 years, but the likelihood is he's going to get you something. And so now you got to go spend money. I mean, listen, let's just be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas is just a much more commercialized, expensive venture than Halloween. Halloween, you just go out and buy candy and trade candy. I mean, we covered that in October.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, everyone goes out. You max out your credit card. You get gifts and you swap them. Everybody spends money. Everybody goes into debt, and you end up getting probably what 50% of the stuff is stuff you really want to keep. Maybe. The rest just sits, or you get it, and after everybody leaves, you look at your spouse, or your friends, your family, you're like, what am I going to do with this? I don't know, but you better wear it at least once so Jimmy can see you with the picture in it to make sure you like it, or you can't throw it away because what if they come back in a year? Hey, how you liking that, how you liking that warm, cool, carbon-plated skillet I got you for eggs? Oh man, loved it. Used it a ton. Yeah, let's make some. Let's use it. And you got to go out to the garage, to the bin, and it's still in its box because you don't want to get rid of it. And you got to convince them that you've used it. You just love it so much you put it back in the box.
Yeah.
What's the worst gift you've ever gotten?
Oh, me?
Yeah, worst gift
I can't.
ever.
I would probably be throwing somebody on our bus here.
I'll go first then.
Okay, you go first because I don't remember.
Yeah, God rest her soul. But my dad's mom, Josephine from Russellville, Kentucky. See him maybe twice a year. Come visit us. I think I'm a freshman in high school. Gets me a hairdryer.
That's pretty solid.
You know what I had at that time?
Shaved head?
Shaved head.
Well,
went it up, but I was like, I got that, and then you know how like some grandparents have like this like standard gift they give you that's kind of like their special thing. Where hers were $50. She'd go to the bank and give me and so I'd get a sleeve, I'd get like $5 to $6 $50 in this like old necklace box from like Castner Knots or McClure's, these old school stores. You would have like 5 or 6, $50 in them. You can't spend them because you feel bad for spending them.
Right.
Because they're supposed to be collectibles. Nobody will take them. And then so I got that and I got a hairdryer.
Mm.
And I remember kind of looking at her and like, thanks, JoJo. She's like, well, if you ever grow it out, you got one.
Yeah. You got one if you need it.
I got one. It's like exactly. You got one if you need it.
You can use it to, tighten up that plastic on the windows and shit like that.
That's right.
That reminds me, because I used to feel like I
could take this hairdryer up to your house and I could help iron out the wrinkles in the plastic around your couch in the living room.
Actually, you still have it because I could probably use that.
No, I don't still have it. You know me. Yeah. If I find something I didn't know that I had it at the time, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to get coins occasionally, as a kid. If I get coins now, I'd be like, yeah, all in on that. But, and then my uncle was an Episcopalian priest. Him and his wife would always send our family a gift. And like every year, we never knew what it was.
Even after you opened it?
Yeah, we opened it and looked at it. And we're like, what do you think? Like what do they call those water sticks or whatever? Like that you'd never.
What the fuck is a water stick?
Well, you know what I'm talking. When you're trying to find water and you kind of hold it out there, what's that called?
I don't know at all what you're talking about right now.
Anyway,
all I'm picturing is that Progressive commercial with Flo where she's joking around and her like sister pulls up a lake making kid, and I'm just like dying laughing. That's what I picture when you say you got a water stick.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Now that upon reflection, I think that's actually the coolest thing ever. Is if you get a gift, you don't even know what it is. It was, it would be just stuff like that was almost like an ornament, but maybe functional. I don't know.
That's
and we used to get such a kick out of that. Because
it's an ornament, but maybe fun. Yeah, those are tweeners, right? You can't like figure out, is this supposed to go on the tree or is this supposed to go on the mantle above the fireplace?
Or is it a coffee grinder? I don't know.
I understand it's decorative, but what's the placement, rules for this piece of decor? On the tree or off the tree?
Right.
And sometimes those are the hardest things to discern.
But yeah, I mean, if you really boil it down, I think some of my best gifts were just socks. I mean, they were the thing, it's kind of the laughable gift that you'd always get your dad. And I'd see him wearing those bad boys, but if I'd try and get something fancy, it was closet bound for life.
Water stick, like a water softener?
Water stick. No.
I just Googled water stick.
No.
And a water softener comes up. You can attach it to your shower head.
You know what I'm talking about. You walk around on land, and if you're holding the stick, and if it like dips down on its own, that means there's water there. Some don't know what that is. I can't.
Oh my God! So that's like the water. That's like the Mother Nature's version of the mood ring.
Something. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's a beautiful analogy.
Oh my! Thank you. That's the only thing I could. That's the only way I can help you out here. Is the mood ring, the mood ring, or the hypercolor shirt of Mother Nature is the water stick. It's please somebody that if there's anyone still listening, if you're out there and you know what a water stick is, please chime in our closed Facebook group. That's probably just having a mass exodus right now. Or if you don't know, maybe start a thread about worst gift you've ever gotten.
Okay.
And see where that goes. Yeah, the best gifts are always the practical ones.
Yeah, that's
socks. Great one. And the wallet that I have now was a gift I got like 6 years ago. Just practical stuff. Give me something I can use daily. Or a Costco gift card. One of the two. Nothing better. Nothing better than walking through Costco and thinking, you know what? I'll take 14 cases of Jif peanut butter, and I'm not spending a dime.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's the best feeling ever.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get you a fathead this year, like Peyton Manning.
Fathead of who? You?
What?
You're gonna get a fathead of yourself?
No, maybe like Peyton Manning or something, just old school.
So in other words, you just get me a regular size head. If it's Peyton Manning's, it'll be a fathead.
Right. Yeah. You can put it up in your basement.
Skull. Put it in my basement. Oh my God. We could probably end it here.
Yeah.
I mean, that could probably be like a nice Christmas, people, I think I saw somebody post in the closed group. They liked it when we did was it the fraud or for real cast or someone that was talking about things. That is not today.
They want us to make that a regular thing.
We really should, honestly.
Yeah,
is make it a real thing. But yeah, now that we've either made you love us or hate us, or be lukewarm on us. And if you're not sure, you can always use the water stick to figure out if you're lukewarm on us or hot or cold. I'll skip the intro today, and I'll just say, if it's your first time tuning in today, a big welcome. We do appreciate your time. Not going to do my normal intro. Go back and listen to the last 734 podcasts we've done to get a good feel for us. But today, now that we've broken through the Christmas talk and the Christmas chatter, I did want to talk about periodization today. Now that we're in a serious mode and loosen things up a little bit. We wanted to talk about it Tuesday, but we got off on what I thought was a really great topic and a timely topic. And that's kind of how we like to roll. But, we were talking over the weekend. We had all the coaches in town. We have a bunch of new coaches coming on board in January. And, a lot of the stuff we did was teaching and education, going over science. But one of the discussions that we had was over periodization. And, a lot of you, if you're not familiar with the term periodization, or you don't have a coach, or you're self-coach, or you're working off a training plan or what have you, you can identify that if you see things written out, right, by periods, right? Everyone knows periods by their name, especially in usually endurance sports, base period or build period, or, what you can call it peak, you can call it race specific, you can call it, race phase, whatever you want to call it. That's kind of the third and final phase as you lead up to your race. And over the years, there's been, 20, probably 1,000, but at least 20 different papers I've read over basically every type of periodization, whether periodization is the end all be all, whether periodization is a total myth and total bullshit, whether it's made up. And then you've got, kind of the standard periodization that people go to. And then you got people who want to kind of coin the phrase reverse periodization to make it sound a little more like, flashy, which there really is no reverse periodization. You're just periodizing in a different way. Because it really, to me, just, if you want to dumb it down, it's just about progression, right? It's about what you want to focus on during a phase and how those phases stack together will lead you to your best potential and outcome on race day, which is, as a coach, one of the hardest things to do. That it's like I've listened to this topic, so many times with a variety of different coaches, and I would agree. I know you would too. Is the hardest part of a coach, especially if an athlete maybe doesn't race a lot, is to get them to peak on one day, right? And for coaches like ourselves, that's hard. But I oftentimes think about how hard that is for coaches, coaching someone through an Olympic cycle, right? 4 years, and it all comes down to wanting someone to peak on one day.
Yeah.
Sometimes for less than a minute. Think about that. You're training to swim the 50 free in the Olympics, and you want to do well, and you want to make sure you're doing your best in Paris in 2024. And it's going to take you less than 20 seconds. And in order to be your best and get a gold medal, when things are, spliced down to hundredths and hundredths of a second, the amount of pressure and probably overanalyzation that you go through trying to get that person to peak, not just on that day, but almost on that minute to execute their best, is really just kind of mind-blowing, and how difficult that is. And I think people tend to, especially athletes maybe in endurance sports and triathlons, tend to maybe underappreciate the skill and the effort that it takes to get someone to peak on that day, whether they race a lot or not. But the way that you and I were talking about before we went live on Tuesday was how I think that so many athletes get lost in trying to periodize their race schedule. And I'll talk about the different periods and what you could traditionally see. This isn't going to be just what you might see with how we do things, and a lot of times it's not, but it's a lot of times what you might read in literature, you might read in, training books, if you purchase those, or plans you might see, and just the general problems that I see with those when you talk about age group athletes that have jobs and families and kids and responsibilities and life, and that this is our hobby and not our sport, and how unpredictable, things are, and how traditional, methods and periodization is probably something that you should not stay away from, but be a lot more flexible with. And So just kind of give you a general overview of what you might see in a traditional periodization phase. Like, so let's say, and then I'll kind of go through the errors in that I see, and then how you might want to rethink is, again, especially if you're self-coached, because we get this question all the time, right? As coaches, what phase am I in? Right? What's the point? When am I going to start my build phase? When am I going to start my race specific phase? And we'll talk specifically about that in a minute. But generally speaking, for a lot of platforms, a lot of training programs and plans, you've got again a progression of base period, build period, race specific period, or peak phase, as a lot of people want to call it, because it makes them feel like they're going to peak regardless of the training. And there's two ways to go about that. Some programs have you, if you've got a race in May and a race in September, right? They just want you to have one big base, build, and peak phase going through your big race in September, right? The whole year is basically planned out for your big race, your A race. They don't do, kind of multiple blocks. They'll just do that one big plan, and then you'll do your race in May, probably during the end of your base, start of your build phase, and then continue on. Some coaches or training plans like to do things race specific. So if you had a race in May, you'd go through a base, a build, a race specific period, all the way up to that race, and then you'd start over again. That's what I like to do with athletes. I like to start totally over again if we're even able to periodize. And then what you may or may not see, right, in the base period, which is, I think, the most boring part of an athlete's plan, is just a whole lot of aerobic work, right? You're working on max efficiency with what you do and how you operate. You're really trying to maximize fat oxidation. You're really trying to make your aerobic capacity shine through, which means, right, to a big chagrin, like a lot of athletes, a lot of zone 2 work, a lot of quote unquote boring work. And that also generally finds the time frame for that is usually, right, if you think about the North American race calendar, which most of you are in, that's the winter time. So you're spending a lot of hours, right, a lot of time inside, boring yourself to death with a lot of aerobic work, right? I'm a huge fan of boring, but a lot of aerobic work, right? You might be doing some skill stuff, working on some strength training, again, all about efficiency, right? Setting yourself up for success, for the rest of the year. Build phase, you might work more into strength work, right? You might add more strength work. You might add more tempo depending on your program. And then what happens a lot of times is you overextend or overcompensate hours. So, for example, if your long rides in your peak phase of training, right, your last phase of training, you're going to be, say you're training for a 70.3 and you're doing 2, and you're going to race around 2.5 hours, right, for some really hard rides in your peak phase, because that's around the same time you're going to race at. You might be doing 3 to 3.5 to 4 hour easier rides, right, to get that stress level up, but get a lot stronger in the build phase, which is, a lot of times you'll see that's the highest amount of volume for athletes, right? So base period, you and I talk about a lot about train to train, so you can train them, you need to train to race. Well, obviously the train period is that base period. Train so you can train like you need to train is that build piece, which to me is one of the most overlooked pieces and parts of an athlete's overall plan. We look at the annual plan or how they want to progress as an athlete, is preparing your body to do the work. For example, in a build phase, if I'm training you, Mike, and you got a 70.3 coming up, we have a certain goal for it. You might be doing 13 to 15 hours. I'm just throwing out ballpark numbers here. 13 to 15 hours of work a week in that build phase. And it might be slower, easier volume, right, with some strength work in there. Again, prepping the body, still maximizing your aerobic ability. But then once we get to the peak phase, what you see a lot is the reduction of hours and the increase in intensity, right? Gearing yourselves more towards, quote unquote, race specific, type of training, long rides with lots of intervals, things that work, that you're working really, really, really hard to do. So instead of doing 13 to 16 hours, you might be doing 10 to 13. But the stress level will be just as high, right? Because you're doing, instead of doing a 3.5, 4 hour easy ride or with some, on rolling terrain, you might be doing a 2.5, 3 hour ride with, 4 by 30 minute intervals at, and it's 85 to 90% of your threshold, which is going to get you the same stress score. So again, it's about accumulating stress, building the cake, and then the peak phase, you will you'll more than likely do a little less volume but more intensity. That's again a general overview of what you will more than likely see in most coaching programs and most training plans you might purchase and what's suggested in books. Now, I have, as you know, George Costanza would say, if we're doing our airing of grievances, I got a lot of problems with those people. Not those people in general, but the overall obsession with periodization, especially for age group athletes. Before I got into that, I wanted to get any of your thoughts.
Well, I just find it's really interesting to me when you met, especially because we've talked about this many times, that whole idea of training 4 years for the Olympics and thinking about that and sort of looking at how in the hell do you go through that over and over, or like how intense that must be to be able to just stick with a plan. And, you know, I just think a lot of, and obviously if you're training for the Olympics, you probably grew up doing what you're doing, right? So, I think about things in terms of, you know, lifetime base and things of that nature too, you know. I think that sometimes with me, that's why I get so, I've kind of had, you know, at least with cycling, I think I try to pull this off a lot. And I know a lot of people that can, you know, it's if you did a lot of cycling, and for me, that was sort of mountain biking, and I have just this sort of natural kind of, it might even be mental, man, a mental base, you know, like I know I can turn it up, and then if I can nail like a peak phase and, you know, kind of be in the ballpark and then nail my peak phase, I feel pretty good about my racing, you know. So sort of this idea of, you know, we talk about patience a lot, and if people can't, you know, like if they're just coming into the sport, they really have no background or whatever, and then we ask them to be patient and really build up that base for, you know, and the first time really, if like you had no background on that, you know, I just think it's a lot more difficult, but it's not really that long. I mean, a lot of people have been doing it forever, you know, or at least some form of something. And I'm real curious about those types of things. You know, we always talk about coaching the person first and knowing the person and things like that. I think a lot of times that really comes into play.
You know, you brought up such a great point, and, you know, maybe the best analogy I can make for why a lot of times traditional, you know, program periodization is the total wrong way to go for athletes. When you talk about stringing things out and predicting how your availability and how you're going to feel and what your progression is going to be for a 20 to 24 week span, right? And then how different everyone is. And I always tell us with our athletes is, you know, hey, when is this phase going to stop? Mm-hmm. When are we going to transition to a different phase? Whenever you're ready. When's that going to be? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. You know, and that's one of the hard pieces. I think athletes, you know, again, like when you look at, if you use the ATP, the annual training plan and Training Peaks, or you work off a plan that you've printed off or from a, you know, an online store or whatever, what have you, and applied it to your training platform, is that, you know, we oftentimes think so many things are way too cut and dry, right? We think there's, you know, when it comes to zones, right? You know, I always use this example. You know, everyone sees zones as this definite or this finite end and beginning with a different zone and what happens to your body, right? Hey, you know, the top end of my zone 2 is 152, and coach, I hit 153 today in my run. I'm really sorry for hitting zone 3. I know that was the gray zone. Like, it doesn't work like that, right? It's not this finite beginning and end, even though a lot of people might want you to think that. It's a lot more like the colors of a rainbow, right? You have shades that are more dominant, and then they don't just stop, right? They blend into the next one. And that is so much of what planning for an athlete's year is like, is if I'm training you and we're in a base period where we're doing a lot of aerobic work and we're doing, you know, a lot of, you know, maybe efficiency work or some short 30-second, 60-minute efforts, whatever have you, and it's working and you're getting better each and every week, why the hell would I just be like, all right, Mike, I understand we're making a lot of progress. I understand things are heading in the right direction. I understand that you're feeling great, but you know what it's time for? Something different.
Totally new.
Totally new. Build phase. Because I planned this out for March 17th. Even though your body is saying it could probably go till May, and what we're doing and still get better, because almost every coach on the planet would tell you the best plan that you can have is to stay in the base period for as long as possible. It's the safest, it's the most beneficial, it's the best way to recruit the things you want to recruit within your body to perform the best. But what gets in the way of most athletes is this black and white vision and layout of what they want to do for the year, right? And then their attention span. So I always tell athletes, if it ain't broke, we ain't fixing it. There is no reason to change things for the sake of changing, right? But going back to what I wanted to make for the analogy, right, outside of the rainbow and how the period should blend together and there's not a finite end or beginning, is how you train an athlete, right? And what that athlete might need more of. Like, so if I start working with an athlete and they're coming to me with a with a sprint distance background, 5Ks, 10Ks, they did track in high school or college, and they're looking to, take things, longer this year. Am I going to be really worried about the speed phase, or am I going to be really working towards the longer, slower stuff for a longer period of time? I'm going to want longer.
Yeah.
They have the background, right? Same can be said for the example that I give a lot with athletes in a non-impact previous sport history with a huge engine, but no impact, right? So if you're a rower or a big time cyclist, and you've got this giant engine and you come into the sport and you have very little, if any, not ability, but running experience, right? You haven't built up the chassis and durability, then you need to keep them, in what I would argue is, different phases at different times, right? I might have them in what you might consider on paper, like if you look at it, a run base focus for 6 to 8 months, maybe, because we're not worried about their engine, right? We're worried about their body's ability to withstand the damage that the speed of that engine, right, can make them go at a certain velocity. That's what you're worried about. So you might continue to hone in on, so you might see almost what looks like 3 different phases blended together, right? You might see a ton of easy running for 6 to 8 months. And during that period, you might see less volume in cycling, a lot of speed work, maybe a lot of high intensity, maybe the VO2 max block. And then you might see a totally different approach with swimming because of their experience. So on paper, if you split all 3 of them out, you might see a swim base, a swim build phase, a bike, peak phase, and a run base phase. And you're like, whoa, I thought they were all supposed to be aligned. They can't always be aligned because, again, you have to think about the athlete and their progression and how they've done, right? Same could be said for an athlete. And this is where, almost immediately if you purchase a training plan or you go on something, within the first couple of weeks, if you've missed a session or you get sick or injured, it's wrong. All right, so let's say you're planning out your year, and these are some of like the major problems I see with trying to plan your year out ahead of time. One, you have no idea about your life. Right? Let's say life is dandy right now and you've got nothing but time. Nothing but time. You're starting in January. Let's say you got a race in September. You got nothing but time. Life is clear. Right? Maybe let's say you're transitioning between jobs. Yeah, I got 69 days severance and I'm just kind of chilling at the house. Well, Ted, we are in what we like to call the base phase. So I understand that you have a high stress level experience and life event coming in the next 90 days, which coincidentally coincides with our bump in training, asking for more stress in your life. But we need to stick to the periodization here, Ted. So I'm going to keep things low right now. And then when it's time on April 1st at 3:33 p.m. to start our build phase, we will begin it. I don't really much care that you have extra time, extra bandwidth, you're getting better sleep, you're not stressed. we're not going to do any extra volume and intensity right now because it doesn't fit in the program, Ted. Think about how ass backwards that is to periodize that way and not take into account a person's life, right? I talk about this all the time with athletes. What are some of the busiest times of year for you? Now I've got, these huge events, these huge life events, or, the end of Q2 and Q4 are really, really hard on me for my job. Okay, then why would we be asking the most out of you then? We can't. Well, traditional periodization says that should be the exact peak phase. No, you have to be flexible and moldable when it comes to listening to that. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of almost periodizing within 2 to 3 to 4 week blocks. Like that's about as far out as what you're going to get for age group athletes. Like the literature and the blog posts and the podcasts you see with pro triathletes and how they did things, how you want to copy and paste it and do the same thing that they did. This is their life. This is their job. Few of them are married. Very, very, very few of them have kids. They have, a support team of 10. Everything is for that. Theirs is so much more predictable than yours. We can only predict maybe 2 to 4 weeks out what life is going to be like, how your body is adapting, right? So that's one of my biggest things is you have to capitalize when life allows you to capitalize. And you got to be flexible to rein things back when it shows you that you can't. And so while it's important to have kind of a broad overview, right, of what you want to accomplish, it's almost, in my experience, it's almost better to attack that on a micro level to ensure you're getting some progression than the macro level, which may never happen, right? And you see this a ton too with, early season run races for athletes that want to do 10Ks, half marathons, full marathons, and what the difference in training looks like for that, and how you periodize for an end of the season 70.3 or full, or let's say, and this is one of the biggest criticisms I have of the ramp rate that a lot of coaches have with periodization and progression is, let's say, I'm working with Jennifer and we're in the base period of, January, February, March. We're getting a lot of aerobic volume in, and she, trips on the curb and sprains her ankle. Can't run for 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. So to keep things safe. So we get a lot of extra swimming and a lot of extra, but we're not running. So we're not only losing 2 to 4 to 6 weeks of training and building. Remember, we're losing, right? There's detraining, right? Your ligaments, your tendons, your musculoskeletal system gets a little bit weaker during that period. So you're not just losing those 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. You've detrained some, and let's say you go back 2 to 4 weeks. Now we have a 10-week gap, right? Because we missed some, right? And where we would have progressed some. That's almost 3 months. So when that person picks back up and, oh, well, I know you just got back from this, but it's time to start our build phase. So you're going to be higher stress swimming, higher stress cycling, right? We talked about that in the traditional phase, how people like to include, reduce, or increase intensity. It might be the highest volume period. So you're going to increase stress and time in both the other two sports that they're capable of, right? Because they've haven't missed it. They may have done even extra. But then running wise, it's a build phase. We're gonna do some hill work. We're gonna do some longer runs, maybe some tempo work, threshold, whatever your specific view is on what should be included or not included during that build phase, the phase right before your big peak phase. You're asking an athlete to do runs, right, at more than likely a longer duration and too long of a length with a higher intensity underperforming, underfit, lack of durability scenarios, adding on additional stress from the swimming and cycling, increase in load and intensity. And that is why, in my opinion, you see so many injuries from the March to June timeframe. I see it all the time. with athletes that start working with us or people that I just are talking to other coaches is that the difference in ramp rate in sports and how much of a layoff a person has, and then trying to blend the two progressions together to, again, make sure the athlete is progressing in the right direction. You're not holding back all three for the sake of one, but at the same time, you're trying to be very intelligent on how you progress. Well, then what do you have? Then what period am I in? And I would ask you, does it even fucking matter? As long as you're getting the right training and the right intensity and the right duration, right, for where your body is, where each sport individually is. So it, again, stacks on stacks on stacks. Like, we're laying bricks here. We got a foundation. We're building a house. We got the framework, and then, in race days when we get to slam the, for sale sign or the close sign in the front yard. That's the progression, right? You can't rush it for the sake of a time frame. And you also can't discount or pretend like there aren't these ebbs and flows in athletes training. And that's why people started to coin the phrase reverse periodization, because with the increase of popularity and accessibility to indoor training platforms and trainers and power meters, is that the base period. There's this famous Lance Armstrong poster that was like, Tour de France in July, and it was something like, the Tour de France is won in January in my basement every year, from all the volume he would do. But you're asking athletes, right, to do this, and in the background you're like, where are all the blood doping bags and everything? But the quote is right? It's like, you win it in the winter when no one's looking.
Yeah.
Right. But you asking, age group athletes who, again, as we increase in time, and I see this as a coach, our, athletes' attention span gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter every year. And that's how reverse periodization came into play. Is they basically flip-flopped the base period in the race specific period, and they added the highest level of intensity and the shortest amount of volume to that preseason type, right? Because it was more engaging. It's a lot easier to sell an athlete. I want you to be in the trainer for an hour and a half. We're going to bust out some intervals. You're going to do a Zwift race. You're going to be on trainer row. We're bumping up your FTP. That's exciting. And doing that instead of doing a 3-hour easy aerobic ride. It's easier to sell, right? But the thing is, it's not reverse periodization. It's just you're flipping two around. It's just you're still periodizing, right? You're doing that with the intent of doing something slightly different in the build phase, and then slowly increasing things in the quote unquote the peak phase, right? Which coincides a lot of times with your ability to ride more outside, right? And that's why that was kind of the genesis behind, again, that coin phrase, which is there's no reverse periodization. It's just periodizing. You don't want to actually reverse a periodization, because then you wouldn't be anyway. Argument for a different day.
Okay.
But that's why things are so different with each athlete, in each person, in each scenario. One person might do best with a 16-week base block, depending on their experience level, and then a 3 to 4 week base phase, or a 3 to 4 week peak phase. Just skip and build, and just that's how they're going to do it. It's really based on the athlete, and then you might find that athletes, respond to different things. I had multiple discussions. And we talked about this, because I encouraged, and you were in the room, and I encouraged all the coaches over the weekend to, while you have to respect and acknowledge and base a lot of your training and what you do with your athletes based on science and experience, you also have to have the confidence to be creative and take a risk and do something different. And there were two of the athletes, and I was talking about how I totally revamped how I've ever done anything in my 10 plus years of coaching for an overall framework of load and work for a lot of the athletes that I had that did Ironmans in September through November. And it was totally different than anything done in the past. And there were a couple of them in the room, and we were getting feedback, and I thought it worked well, but I was super nervous about it. And it ended up turning out really, really, really good results. I thought they had a top 10 female finish in Wisconsin, a top 10 male finish in Wisconsin. Another athlete I spoke to yesterday that did Florida, she was on the podium, was like, yeah, we did everything effort. And the thing that I changed was that instead of going and asking for, again, going back to periodization, instead of asking these really, really, really big weeks out of an athlete, which is, again, what you might see in a traditional, load, response, reload, response. That's how our body get better. Our bodies respond and get better and adapt. I went in a more a steady, even load approach that was a little bit longer. So it was more of a, you and I both like to do a little bit shorter blocks for athletes because I think it's just better overall for their health and their attention span and their speed than to do like a 16-week Ironman block. It's just, it bores people to death and they end up peaking like 6 weeks too early, and then they do a 3-week taper and wonder why they're stale as hell on race day. Is I usually do like a 6 weeks, but this one I went 8 weeks and did no recovery weeks. I just did 8 steady weeks, and I weaved in, a day off every other week with another easy day, maybe be a swim and a ride. So it was really more working off 10-day blocks with 2 or 3 days, and that really helped build a steady load. But if you look at traditional periodization, there really wasn't a true progression from base to quote unquote peak. It was almost a periodization within each 10-day cycle. What are we doing for these 10 days? Microcycle. What are we doing for the mesocycle? What are we doing for this whole season macros? It was more like, what are we going to do with this 10-day block? Because again, if you work with long distance athletes, you never know what you're going to get, right? Am I hurt? Am I sick? Am I fatigued? Oh, well, you know what? I understand you were sick last week, but you know what? We're bumping up the volume this week, baby. It's the build phase. It's the peak. You can't do that. And so that's why, again, like, it's good to have a good overall understanding, right, of how things should progress. But I would really encourage, especially self-coach athletes, to, instead of obsessing, which athletes love to do, plan out their year, for the next, year, and maybe what they're going to do in early 25. That's fine and dandy. Do what you got to do to keep you engaged. But one of the most important things they can do is to look at, is to focus on what you want to accomplish with the forest, but then just focus on the tree in front of you. How long you might be there with it, how long you need to stay close to it, and then move on to the next one, instead of, maybe skipping, a whole set. Focus on very small, tangible progressions, and really understand that ultimately the best progression, the best tactic to get you better is slow, methodical, intentional load, and then unload, and then load again. Regardless of what it looks like, 80% of the success for age group athletes is just allowing them the ability to be successful through consistency, week in and week out, every month of the year.
Yeah, well, lot there, man.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's all good, man. I it's just some of the things you said there. I always think about myself, and even going back to what I just said previously here, and then it becomes a tough pill for me to swallow in reality, because what I was saying was that I am more comfortable in intensity, and I tend to shortchange the base and the build a lot of times, I think, and that's actually what I need, probably the most. In fact, I would gather that if I trained, say, for Wisconsin again this year, which is very possible, I would be much better off if I could consistently put together 3 to 4 hour long rides, for example, all the way through, rather than, dabbling around and then knocking out a few 5-hour rides, or a couple here and there, 6 maybe. And I just think in overall, for me as an athlete, my base phase is probably usually what's lacking the most. And I just sort of have that intensity gear, but I don't have the strength usually in my races over the last, several that I've done. I was thinking kind of back to, when we started together back in Nashville, how often would we go out to the trace and do exactly just that, maybe like 3 to 4 hour rides. We had some 5s in there. we rode hard. Sometimes we get an itch and just get in the pace line or whatever and go after it. But for the most part, we're just kind of building strength on the hills. It wasn't overly intense, but it was just solid riding for like 3 or 4 hours. And we did it a lot, right? I mean, way more than I would choose to do that on my own. But that is the type of stuff. It's almost like we have to figure out a way to fall in love with the stuff we hate. I have a lot of athletes too that are the other way. I kind of want to go chill and, zone to it. And, whether it's swim or bike or even running, they just like that. And I think that's good. But, you talk about, I guess, getting better, performing better. There's got to be a way to kind of flip a switch. And, if you look at these periodizations, maybe that's a good way to look at it, is the base, the strength, and the peak. What are you worst at?
Yeah.
And that's something that, if you're always doing base year round, and again, if you're consistent year round and you have a nice base and you can kind of just chill at your zone 2 all day kind of deal, then then it is time maybe to think about strength a little bit more and peak a little bit more if you want to get faster and if you want to get better, which I think most people do. But again, sometimes doing what it takes isn't always the easiest thing.
Right.
So I just, to break it down simply like that, because I always like to think about it in terms of strengths and weaknesses and things like that. And if you're falling apart at the end of your race, you probably do need a little bit of strength, because I just don't, I talk about quote unquote speed a lot. And, even this year when I had a tough race up there and my legs were absolutely fried, there was a couple sections late in that marathon when my quote unquote pace was okay, but I was just falling apart physically, so it's not like, especially long course as we get older, it's not like we're going to really be topping out our speed or anything like that. But if we have a decent speed and we can hold a good pace, that's what matters. Not, always sprinting around a track and shit like that. So yeah, for me, it's just like, I think definitely the base phase is probably my weakness, and, but it's just, again, like you said, it's just, how do you learn to love boring, and this is really one of the mindsets I'm in where I'm at now, is kind of, it's a wintery kind of situation. And I talked before about putting the hood up on the hoodie and just getting after it, without any kind of praise or any kind of that, just grinding it out. And I love what, Lance was saying, is that he wins it in January or whatever. But because I think that's true, we can't just hope and flip a switch at some point. And, sometimes that works for certain people, but the ability to train so you can train like you need to train, and from my case, that might be a shorter peak, you know what I mean? Just to kind of tune things up or whatever, but have a really nice, strong base.
Yeah. And you said a lot there, and I'll end it here because we're going a little bit long today, but a last little, maybe a little bit of insight, somebody like yourself, and for those athletes who, again, because I think a lot of athletes struggle with that dedication to aerobic work, and a lot of it can be done just with a slight manipulation with their intervals and, the ratio of intensity to rest. And you can still do that while still keeping your overall engagement. And I've got a few rides that I'll put in, and even runs for athletes that I will put in there, and I have this initials HG attached to them. And they probably, no one's asked me, but they're my Hansel and Gretel sessions, where I like to leave breadcrumbs along the way to keep you engaged, to get you to where you're going. I want the intention to really be, for example, a 3-hour endurance ride. That's what I really want. But what I know is that Mike Turali is going to see that and be like, fuck that, dude, I'm doing 90 minutes hard. And, it's like, I don't want that. And your likes and dislikes are a lot more common than people think, right? Because people are busy. People got shit to do. Sometimes people just get bored to hell. So if I'm structuring a 3-hour ride like that, I might acknowledge that your personality is that. So if you see a 3, you're almost automatically going to be disengaged and uninterested. So I might say 2.5 hours, and I might do, 30 minutes steady riding. And then I might insert, 10, 20-second all out efforts with 40 seconds recovery. Something kind of get your juices flowing. Yeah, that's kind of, I'm all about that.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I might weave in 20 to 25 minutes more of easy riding. And then another set of maybe this time it's 12, 20-second all outs, 40-second easy. Yeah, I can work 20 and then do that again and do that all the way up till we get to 2.5 hours. Well, the cool thing about that is that if you're getting 2.5 hours of riding in, I met you halfway and recognize that you need a little bit of variety in your life, right? That you want to go hard. I made it to where, we still started out pretty easy, but on an interval level, by giving you those 20-second efforts and then making the recovery 40, even though you're going really, 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 really hard, as athletes know, like you will oftentimes see your higher heart rate in that rest interval versus the 20-second interval, because your heart rate takes a while to, and even how your breathing goes. You'll be pushing zone 5, zone 6 power during the first 10 seconds of that effort, but it takes your aerobic system and your heart rate time to catch up because it's fully rested. And then you got 40 seconds. So we got some good top end work, but what we did is we actually kept things fairly aerobic with just manipulating the rest to work ratio. And so now I actually got the intent of what I wanted to get, which is 2.5 hours of work in, and gave you what you wanted by just leaving breadcrumbs along the way.
Yeah.
Little teasers, right? Little intervals here and there. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Oh, yeah, it makes the time go by fast. Best compliment you get as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, that made the time go by fast. Perfect. You were engaged. Didn't feel like it was, the time was moving, so slow or not moving at all, and you got it all done. Right? Is that your ultimate aim as a coach? No, but at least you know that it's kind of a way to measure an athlete's attention span and where they're kind of where they're engaged and where they're not engaged, especially this time of year when so much is done inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, honestly, that's how I'll approach things sometimes anyway. It's like I can't just sit there for 3 hours. And I like that you said that, man. That's perfect. I mean, it's your workout. Get a little bit of action. I mean, it's like strides almost for the bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of only looking at lap time. I do that a lot when I'm training myself. Is if I got like a long ride, I'll just kind of cover up my watch,
mm-hmm.
and then ride as long as I can really my attention span and my boredom can handle, and then I'll keep my watch covered and hit the lap button. So all I see now is when I want to do my intervals, and then so I'll do like a certain set, like that set of intervals. Right? I might do 10 or 12 20-second all outs, 40-second easies. So I'll use my lap button to make sure I'm doing my intervals right. And then as soon as I hit my last interval and cool down, I'll lap it and then cover it up again. Mm-hmm. And just ride for as long as because it's just a mind trick. You can always peak, right? But it's like, hopping on the treadmill and staring at the clock move or covering it up. Right. It's always joked that's like the equivalent of having a kid in the car on an 8-hour road trip. Are we there yet?
Yeah.
Are we there yet? Been in the car for 30 minutes. How much longer? And that's how you feel. And that's just a way to want to quit things. So if you can do this little tricks like that to make the time, it doesn't go by faster, right? Because time goes by the same speed all the time, but it keeps your attention span and it kind of breaks things up into chunks. And then a lot of times you'll kind of get like, oh shit, I did 2.5 hours today. But if I had said stare at the clock for 2.5, then you'd be like, I'm not doing it. After 35 minutes, you look down, and it's you think you've been on there for 90 minutes and it says 47 minutes, 28 seconds. You're like I can't do this. I don't want to do it. And then all of a sudden you're off.
Yeah. How many times you hit that lap button 7 minutes in? It's like, oh shit, that's 25 minutes.
Funny, right? It's always funny to go back and look. And see like after the workouts, they're like, how long did I think it was today versus how long it was? It's kind of like the same of, calibrating yourself and time and distance and space is, going out for your first mile and not looking at your watch. And then when it clicks over before you even look at your watch, guess what the time is? and seeing how close you are. It's like that I always find kind of interesting and also engaging.
Yeah, man. The trainer, you got to find a groove on there somehow.
Yeah, it giveth and it taketh away.
Yeah, after a couple weeks, I can kind of start dialing in. And that's what I'm working on right now. I really want to do that.
Giveth and taketh away. We hope this podcast did nothing but giveth. We may have taken a little bit away in the Christmas talk, but hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, we could always use more help in the water stick department or hearing some of your fun Christmas stories. So if you're in our closed Facebook group, again, if you're not in it, search Crushing Iron Group. Be a part of that conversation. Someone get us rolling on a worst Christmas gift thread. And because, let's be honest, that is crucial to a faster transition in 2024 per Triathlete magazine. Or if you have any feedback or experience with water sticks, please make sure you
come on, man. I resisted a temptation to try and look it up. But it just came to me. I think it's called something to do with a wand.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Okay. So someone will find it. Let us know. I'm not even going to look it up because I don't care.
We haven't even released this yet, and somebody's already found it.
I know. That's the thing. You just throw it out to the universe. I've been trying to practice that, actually, not looking things up and trying to think of them. I've done that, I know
how you get to, because the next
what's
thing
that guy? Oh, hang on. I'll look it up. No. Let's think about it for a second. Let's see if we can use our brain. I think I told you that when I was in college. Before we had phones and all that shit, we would always do sports trivia. And we just sit around the room and just argue. That's not it. That's not him. That's not him. Yeah. And finally, it would come to a precipice, and we had the phone number to the ESPN desk, so we would just call them and have them look it up. That was right when. Hey guys, calling from lacrosse again. Who was the quarterback at Clemson when they won like that kind of shit?
Trevor Lawrence.
What's that? No, it was before Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. Checking. Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, no, it was in the 80s.
That was Sweeney.
Yeah, it could have been.
He was a cornerback, I think, though. Anyway, that's it. That's all we got for this week. Hope you guys are getting ready for Christmas. We'll be back again next week for a two-timer. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. If you're racing this weekend, go out there, have a good time. Do your best. Leave the rest. And go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and it's our one-stop shop for all things coaching camps and community. If you're looking for a coach for 2024, click on the coach tab and find the one that's right for you. And as always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available. CrushingIron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy.
All right, man. See you next week.
See you.